Welcome back to Load the Box. It's been a long time, Jordan. I've been either sick or busy or out or whatever. I feel like it's been a month or something since I've been on the show. We took a couple weeks off also to recuperate, get our family lives in order, and now we're back. It's the final show before the draft. Kwesi talked a couple times last week, one to the media, one on Paul Allen's radio show. So we got that to digest, and we also got to get our final draft thoughts in. So Jordan, did you take anything of substance from what Kwesi had to say last week, or was it just a lot of GM speak?
It was a lot of GM speak, in my opinion. As we were going through notes of what we were going to talk about, we were kind of refreshing what was said in that interview, and I think I put it best because he basically said, "Yeah, we might draft a quarterback, we might draft somebody else, we might trade up, we might stay where we're at. Who knows? Could be crazy, could be mundane. Not going to really give you guys anything." And I think Kwesi tried to put his best poker face on. There was one moment from one of his press conferences that kind of made the rounds on X that I want to bring up. And that was a reporter asked him, and I'm going to butcher this because this, happened last week and a lot has happened since last week in, everyone's lives and everything. But he was asked how many franchise quarterbacks he believed were in like this draft class, or something along those lines. And Kwesi responded with, if I feel like if I answered that, it would affect my conversations with other teams. And I disagree with that sentiment. I feel like the answer should just be like, we think there's 10. We think there's 10 franchise quarterbacks in this draft class, because then you devalue New England's pick or the Chargers pick, and you say like, yeah, look, we are in love with Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina, and we think he could be the best guy in this draft. So, we'll give you this year's first round picks, and that's it to move up, and you can kind of play some hardball. But realistically, I understand where he's coming from. Like you said, beautifully said, it was GM speak. It was, yeah, I'm gonna say a lot of words without really giving you anything of substance. The Chinese food of interviews, if you will. It fills you up quick, and then you're like, wait, did I actually get anything from that interview, or did he just say what everyone already knows?
Yeah, I think honestly that's kind of how I read it. I mean, there was things to pull out of that in the way in which he articulated himself, I think. Now I want to touch on one thing. You mentioned Kwesi might be in love with 10 different prospects or whatever. I think you said that flippantly. But those were some specific words that I believe Kevin Seifert used to describe the, quarterback team sort of marriage thing, because Kevin has called it a marriage, right? And so, the reporter, and I believe it was Kevin Seifert, I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, but was kind of going along on that, that tangent and saying like, so like, are there any that you're in love with? And then Kwesi's like, yeah, there's a lot that we're in love with. And I think there can be a tendency to take that too far. Like, oh gosh, Kwesi doesn't have a guy that he likes, or like Kwesi just sees the good, or whatever it might be. But I think there's something to be gleaned from that, insofar as that is Adolfo Menza saying, we're not married to one or two guys, and there are multiple guys that we'd be willing to take. But I also think it might mean, coupled with a few other things that he said throughout the press conference last Thursday, is that I don't think he is necessarily going to be crazy aggressive in trading up. I think I might have thought differently before. I don't know if it's necessarily changed my perspective listening to what he had to say last week, but I do think, and I've waffled on this. I've waffled on the idea of, will he trade up? Will he not trade up? I had people ask me all weekend whether or not I thought he was gonna trade up, and I think he is going to be firm in his stance that he's only going to have a price that he's willing to pay, and if the asking price is too far above that, he's not going to go for it. Now, And I think the fact that he's saying he's in love with multiple quarterbacks, or they're in love with multiple quarterbacks, kind of lends itself to that. Because he might not be too aggressive in giving away 2, 3, 4 draft picks to move up the board, because there's multiple guys he might be okay with. Now, that could just be posturing, but if you're trying to read between the lines of what he said, there might be a little bit something to that. I don't know. How did you read that whole sentiment that he was
I think
giving off?
I think that's his creative way of, yeah, I don't want it's this. It's like a yard sale. You don't want to overpay for an item, and you want to go in and lowball the crap out of somebody. Anyone that's bought a used vehicle knows that you always try to lowball. You go in and they're asking $7,000 for this vehicle, and you say, "I'll give you 2," and then you try to haggle your way as close as you can. And so, yeah, I think that's just Kwesi's way of trying to devalue draft picks that are higher than 11, which is obviously where the Vikings are selecting right now. And I do think that it could still be the truth. However, I don't know that. I think the Vikings have a favorite guy. I don't know who that is. I'm not plugged in at that level that, some people are, but if I had to guess, it would be like May or McCarthy, right? Like, that seems more like this prototypical offense, like the kind of guy that O'Connell wants. I don't think O'Connell wants a Jaden Daniels who's going to be a lot more off script and a lot more, hate to use this comparison because I feel like it's overdone, but Daniels is jazz and McCarthy is classical, like those stupid music comparisons or whatever. But I'm sure that they do have their guy, but I also don't think that they're upset if, McCarthy and the other 3 guys in front of him all go the first 4 or 5 picks, and they find themselves with a really good defensive tackle at 11, or really good, you name it, at 11. And then maybe they do like someone like Penix or Nix enough that they think, yeah, this guy has franchise potential, and we believe we can get that out of him. We think he's more of a project than the top 3 or 4 guys, but we think we can get that franchise level play out of him, especially with the weapons that we're going to surround him with. So then we can just take him at 23 and everyone goes home happy. We got the quarterback of the future. We've got Sam Darnold to stout next year, and everything ends up just fine.
Yeah, then that's the other thing that I think is curious to think about. That, yeah, Sam Darnold, I don't think anybody thinks he's the long-term solution. But I think there is hope in the building, and you would think within maybe the fan base that Kevin O'Connell has an ability to work with quarterbacks at a level higher than the previous coaching that Sam Darnold has received, maybe, to say it kindly. Now, Kyle Shanahan was his coach last year, but that's a whole different story because he didn't really get a chance to play. So it's something to think about. It's something to think about. Will Sam Darnold be able to raise his play to a point where he's maybe not a just this year solution? Maybe he's a this year and next year solution if they don't get the guy this year. If they do stick and pick at 11 and 23 and they don't trade up, do they maybe give Sam Darnold a second run at this if things go okay? So I don't know. I don't know if there's any reason to believe that there's, any hope there, but that's another thing that I don't think people are talking about because I think this is the year in everyone's mind, but things can change if the draft board falls differently and it doesn't go according to what you would hope. Then maybe you're in a position where you try and get as much out of Sam Darnold as you can this year and next year, and you draft your guy next year.
Yeah, and I think that there's a real possibility that Sam Darnold does end up stouting a lot more than maybe we expected, and I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. If you are expecting the Vikings to make a Super Bowl run in 2024 or 2025, I guess would be when the Super Bowl was played, but this upcoming season, I think that the best case scenario for the Vikings is a similar result as what happened last year. I mean, hopefully everybody stays healthy. We don't miss Jefferson for as long, and Hawkinson comes back healthy. And I know people are going to hate to hear that because you're wasting prime years of, Darrisaw and O'Neal and Jefferson and all of your young, like, foundational pieces. But I don't think expectations should be that high for the Vikings this season. They should just not look dysfunctional. Like, at no point should we think, okay, yeah, Kwesi and Kevin, like, aren't the guys, like, at all. We should just be like, yeah, look, those young talent, we like the moves that they've made. Maybe they can sneak into the playoffs, but that's probably their ceiling. And I hate to use this comparison because this is obviously, like, the grand slam in Game 7 of the World Series, best moment ever. But the best case scenario, I think, is the 2016 Chiefs? Or was it the 2017 Chiefs? Well, Alex Smith is stouting. They have Patrick Mahomes on the bench. No one knows if he's any good. He doesn't play all season. And you still end up with a pretty competent team led by a good running game, a competent quarterback, and a pretty solid defense. And then you can throw the rookie in the next season, and holy crap, now they've got Patrick Mahomes. Or in the Vikings case, it's holy crap, they've got this, sensational young quarterback who, is going to lead them to multiple championships, yada, yada. So I think that this is kind of just a buffer season, and I hate to say that because, there's a large section of this fan base that, has adopted this, we just want one Super Bowl before we die. And that's like a lot of people say that, and a lot of people subscribe to the show that coined that phrase. And so I'm not hating on that show. I feel like you have to be okay with a down season when you lost your quarterback. You've had this rock stability for 6 years, and now you don't have that. So there's going to be a little bit of a bumpy transition of power, but you have to trust that the coach and the GM are doing things correctly, which I'm not ready to just punt on either one of them because the Vikings had a rough season last year when Jefferson went down and Cousins was down and, like the defense was banged up and kind of bad. Like, I don't know. I'm not ready to punt on anybody yet. So.
No, I think that's good insight. I think the fact that the team last year stayed afloat and, mathematically had a chance at the postseason in Week 18 was remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, they still finished like a couple games out of the postseason, but if they had a couple things go their way in Week 18, they would have made the playoffs. So to stay afloat as long as they did was pretty remarkable, and I think that shows what you're saying, that there is function in this organization. I want to take a peek at the whole trade-up thing. I sort of mentioned it earlier. We've talked on this show all spring, and that we think they're probably going to trade up. We think, this is the year. If you have a year to do it, you do it now. Has your feeling on that changed at all over free agency, over the trades that have been made, discussions that have been had? Where are you at with it?
I think that they're going to trade up. I have accepted that I don't think it will be into the top 3. I think they're going to trade into the top 5. And whether it's with Arizona or Los Angeles, I think they're going to either settle for McCarthy, which I don't think they would say settle for McCarthy. I think that the hype around J.J. McCarthy is very real and kind of well-deserved. He's he did really well at Michigan. He just didn't have as many opportunities as you would want to see him like go on this Joe Burrow run at Michigan. So I think that they're either going to settle for McCarthy. Now you're hearing that Drake May might be slipping. And look, this might be a CJ Stroud situation where everyone all season said this guy is the number 2 pick in the draft. And then suddenly from out of nowhere around draft season, well, actually, he might be a second-round pick, and he might not even be taken in the top 10. He might fall to the Vikings at 11. I don't think that happens. I think that's all a smokescreen. That's probably the Vikings putting that out there that, oh, yeah, May. Oh, we hate Drake May. We don't like this guy. Drake May, I think, will make someone very happy in a similar fashion to CJ Stroud, but I think the Vikings are moving up. I think the move with the Texans seemed to telegraph that. And everyone said this at the time. This isn't breaking news, but like when they moved up and got that second first round pick, that was all anyone was saying was, hey, that gives the Vikings something that no other team has, and that's another first round pick tonight or next Thursday night that you can use to pick a player to contribute immediately instead of 2 years from now. You can pick a player in the first round. Like, it is a first round pick the night of the draft, and that's something that the Giants don't have. That's something that Denver doesn't have. All these other teams that are looking to trade up, Vegas, Atlanta, I guess not Atlanta anymore, they got Cousins, but all the other teams that are looking to trade up don't have that asset. And I think that's why the Vikings made that move. And Dustin, I thought, did a really good job. If you didn't listen to the Dustin Baker show, go back and listen to the Dustin Baker show. Anytime he comes on, I think it's just a great opportunity for all of our listeners and all football fans to get a little bit smarter listening to Dustin Baker talk. But he kind of articulated the same sentiment of, yeah, look, it's probably ammunition for a trade up, but like, what's the worst case scenario? They don't trade up and they have 2 first round picks. Are we going to complain about that? Like, if they don't make a trade up and they end up getting Penix or Bo Nix or whoever it is in that spot. So, my opinion, though, to answer your question, they're moving up. Is that still your opinion, or it sounds like your needle might be moving?
Yeah, well, I also want to ask you before I answer that, do you think that they will pay any price to move up? I mean, obviously they're not going to give away 7 draft picks or something, but in the spirit of the question, are they gonna give up 3 first rounders, or are they gonna just give up 2 first rounders? Like, what price? Like, do you think they're going to really sell the farm for this, or do you think they have a stopping point on the scale of value that they're going to give away?
I think right now, and this is all speculative, right? This is all just Jordan Hawthorne, the Madden GM, speaking, but just getting a feel or like what my gut says, which it could be wrong. Okay, I eat a lot of hot wings, but I think 3 first round picks is probably their stopping point, but that conflicts with the Brett Coleman report that came out towards the end of the season, or maybe it was like right after the season, that the Vikings tried to sell everything to move up into like the top 3 last year, but the team that they were going to move up with said no because the Vikings were probably going to pick too late for those picks to really maintain their value. And so that makes me believe, look, maybe not. Maybe they were ready to go full, who was the running back for the Saints or the Dolphins or whoever it was. I think it was Ditka that traded up and traded like all 7 picks and moved up to get one guy, had one player drafted in that class, and it was a running back. And maybe they do something crazy like that, but my gut says right now the Vikings are calling these teams in the top 5, and they're saying, we have 2 first-round picks. That's the offer. And the teams are saying no. And they're saying, okay, well, we have a third one. What do you think of that? And I think other teams are saying no to that because they're waiting to see if the Giants want to throw in a third, first-round picks. So, yeah, I'm curious on your opinion on if they're going to move up. And apologies, my Google did just tell me the weather and my lights dimmed because it's 9 o'clock here in Cincinnati, which means it's bedtime. But
I think my needle is moving a little bit. I think maybe if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have been fully convinced that a trade up was happening and this was the year. You can't miss out on this great quarterback class. And I still think there's validity to that because, obviously next year's draft class doesn't look as strong as this one, just by nature of the sheer amount of prospects that are in this draft. And you're hopefully not going to have as high of a pick next year, right? You would hope that you have a better season next year. So if there is a year to do it, it's the year when you go 7-10. It's the year when you have 2 first-round picks in the top 25. Sense. I think the thing that is giving me caution to fully buy into that perspective is we know that Kwesi is all about value. And he's all about making sure that everything has a value attached to it, and he's not just someone who he doesn't just look at these as players. He looks at these as guys as players, and also probably like the analytical approach to what they will achieve down the road. He probably has more of a value-centric perspective on it than we have seen.
Yeah.
And I believe that he probably has a price in his mind where he is not going to be willing to waver on, because I think the way in which he thinks about things is, and he said as much in his press conference, that if you just get a good quarterback but you don't have the talent around him, that good quarterback doesn't mean a whole lot. Because I think he called a football team like a machine. Like you have to have pieces around the quarterback in order for the machine to work. And I think in his mind, if the teams in the top 5 or whatever are asking for too much, and they're asking for 3 first-round picks and a second to move up to 4 or whatever, I could see him saying, no thanks. I'll take an edge rusher at 11, and I'll take Michael Penix at 23. Because I think there's also validity to that, where you get a guy like Michael Penix who can sling the ball, has some injury concerns, but when you draft him at 23, it doesn't have the same level of, oh my gosh, we gave up the farm for this guy, and if he doesn't hit, if he gets hurt in his second year, we're not, like, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm thinking might happen. I don't know if I could necessarily land in a camp at this point. I think my perspective on it is changing daily and by the hour, it feels like. But I do think that there's going to be a ceiling in which he will give up picks for a quarterback.
And I think that's smart, and that it would be really easy for the Vikings GM, and we don't know this because neither one of us has a personal relationship with Kwesi, but it would be easy for him to just panic and, bite his nails down to the bone and be calling every GM and, oh my God, what do you want? We have to get a quarterback. We have to do this year. Cousins just walked away. If we don't find one, it's all going to bone down. They're going to fire me. I'll never get this chance again. And I think Kwesi, at least in his press conferences, which again, GMs are liars. That's what they are paid to do. But in his press conferences, he is conveying this, look, we have Sam Darnold, and now there's reports coming out that next season's draft also is going to have some quarterbacks in it. And, I think they said this without directly saying it, at least it's how I took it, where it was like, yeah, there's going to be some quarterbacks in next year's draft too. And we can stout Sam Darnold for 17 games. Where do you think that pick's going to land? And I'm not as, out on Sam Darnold as some people are. I don't think he's the answer to the quarterback question. I think he's just a temporary solution. He's a stopgap. But yeah, look, would it suck for the Vikings to win 5 games next season and pick in the top 5? Yeah, absolutely. Would it be kind of cool to see the Vikings have a legitimate shot to draft like Shador Sanders or Carson Beck out of Georgia? Like, one of these quarterbacks that's going to be coming out that is also going to be really good. Let me correct myself. Is going to be very highly touted. At the same level that McCarthy and May and Daniels and all these guys, aside from Caleb Williams, who's been, kind of labeled as that generational prospect. I don't think there's one of those, but the Vikings don't have a chance of getting that guy because he's going to the Bears. So there's not even a world where we could get the generational guy. So I think that, yeah, there's going to be comparable opportunities in next year's draft. I think Kwesi's slow playing this, and I think he can have that confidence and he can, convey himself that way. I would assume the Wilfs have given him their blessing of take your time. We don't want you to do what Rick Spielman did and panic draft Christian Ponder. We don't want you to just kind of fix the problem by drafting Teddy Bridgewater and take a flyer. If you think that the answer is trade up this year, you have our blessing, trade up. if it's too rich to trade up, we'll take a down season, and we'll tell Jefferson sorry about it, but we're gonna figure it out next year. And Shadell Sanders has a Cybertruck and a cool watch celebration, and how would you like him to be your quarterback? Because that might be what we're looking at now. And so I think what I'm getting from Kwesi is he's very flexible in his approach, and he's very adaptable. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like Kwesi as a GM. Yep. That, and I think that he's had a really good offseason so far this season. I think this has been his best offseason to date, just with the guys that he's brought in. But I want to really quickly ask you, do you have a preference? Does Will have a preference? I know you said that you kind of don't have a camp right now. You can't put yourself in the team trade up, team stick and pick on what you think will happen. Would you rather see the Vikings trade up if it meant like a guaranteed JJ McCarthy at least? Or would you rather see them just pick Penix at 23? Maybe get nuts and trade up into like the late second and take Spencer Rattler, who my family makes fun of me for loving because I lost money gambling on Spencer Rattler a few times this season.
It's hard for me to answer, but if I had to choose, I think my preference would be that they trade up, and that's coming from the fan in me. The fan in me is, wanting the excitement, is wanting the hope that comes with a, first round top 10 quarterback, right? When you get that guy, there's more hope and excitement than if you draft a guy in the second round. There's maybe a little bit of expectation, but no one's going to be expecting them to do great things. I think the analytical perspective in me, though, if I really had to choose removing the fandom, like let's say I was a Los Angeles Chargers fan. Actually, that's a bad example because they'd be a potential trade partner. What if I was a New York Jets fan and I was covering the Vikings and I had no stake or whatever in whether or not they did well? I think I would honestly say that I'd prefer them to stay where they are. Because I think, to your point, Adolfo Menza and the front office is doing a really good job assembling a really good roster. And what do we see from these quarterbacks who tend to do really well? They tend to be drafted by well-run teams. They tend to be drafted by teams who have solid rosters. Patrick Mahomes came into the ideal situation. Sam Darnold, if he would have been drafted by the Chiefs, his story could have been a lot different. Not saying he would have been Patrick Mahomes, but there is something there of where you get picked and what situation you find yourself in. It matters a lot. Now, does 3 draft picks to trade up and get a guy who has a higher upside matter a whole lot? I don't know. Draft picks, like we've said on this show 100 times, are a crapshoot. So there might not be a whole lot of, value on just those picks. But I think the point that I'm trying to get at is JJ McCarthy on the Vikings with one less edge rusher and one less offensive guard and potentially one less cornerback on his defense could be less successful than Spencer Rattler on a team with a first round guard and a first round edge rusher. And you know what I mean? Like there could be a little bit of give and take there that they have to be okay with. So I think, again, I didn't pick a side, but I think if I'm gonna put on my reporter podcaster hat, I think I would actually say stick and pick.
Yeah, I thought you did a good job of answering the question, because there is that conflicting, I've said it multiple times, if the Vikings could somehow get like Latu in this draft, I'd buy the jersey immediately. I mean, he would be my favorite player, the second he signed his rookie deal. Like it would be like in the blink of an eye, snap of a finger, whatever. I'm in love with him as a prospect. I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. And so I would love to see us get Latu and then Penix at 23. I watched Penix during the national championship fully expecting that he was going to like play. I thought he was going to play better in that game. And then he was going to skyrocket up, be a top 10-ish pick. He would end up being the Vikings quarterback. And I mean, I was on Amazon looking at do-rags because I was going to like take a do-rag to the draft party. And there's a song by Baby Keem, Kendrick Lamar's cousin, who is also a rapper, really good. Saw him live in concert a couple years ago. But he has a song called Do-Rag Activity. And I was playing it, and, you know, me and the baby were dancing to it during the Natty, and, like, you know, we were having a good time. Like, I love Michael Penix. I love him as a prospect. I love his game. But I agree with you that, you know, there is that the idea of, like, oh, the quarterback can just come in, and you can just draft Patrick Mahomes, and suddenly you're the Chiefs. That's not how it works. Josh Allen was drafted by the Bills. I'm pretty sure, the Bills went to the playoffs the year before that with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback, and they had a defense and a run game. Mahomes, Alex Smith took that team to the playoffs the year before. Oh, the year that he was on the bench, like his rookie season, they went to the playoffs. You know, and then there was a third one, Lamar Jackson. Like the Ravens were a playoff team without Lamar Jackson, and then they added this quarterback in. And so I think that really is the key to success is prove that you have a competent roster and front office and coaching staff, and then figure the quarterback out, not roll the dice and pray that you get a quarterback that is so good that it overcomes everything else, because you really don't see guys overcome like dysfunctional franchises. I'm trying to think of an example, and is it Brett Favre with Green Bay? Like, I think that's the one that's coming to mind, where it was like, oh yeah, that was it. Like, you know, he showed up and they suddenly kind of took off, and I can't remember exactly what the Packers did the seasons before they traded for Favre, but I know they were really bad for a really long time. And even that wasn't like they turned into a dynasty. They won one Super Bowl with the guy, and then drafted, you know, a top 5 quarterback after that, and then Jordan Love, who had a pretty solid season. But we won't talk about that because we're already a half hour deep into the show. I'm going to do my final thoughts really quick. Is that kosher? Are we good?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, what do you think about doing final thoughts with a surprise question of mine?
Would you believe me if I was thinking earlier on the show I was going to surprise you with a question? I want to know what your question is, and if it's the same, I'm going to jump up and down.
I was curious if you had a position group that you, after all the free agent moves, after all the trades that Kwesi has made in the last month, if there is a position group that you still want the Vikings to prioritize. Because about 2 months ago, we did a sort of draft preview where we talked about the positions and all that the Vikings need and went through a handful of players. And then at a certain point, some of those position groups are somewhat irrelevant based on the moves that were made. So I'm curious if there is a position group that we talked about earlier that you're still thinking we got to hit hard on linebacker or cornerback or whatever.
I think the obvious answer here is defensive tackle, and so I think I've hit the table enough times that, like, hey, the Vikings don't really have a good defensive tackle on the team, and I would like to have at least like one good one, and I don't know that we have that right now. It's going to be hard to attack that with the lack of mid-round picks that the Vikings have, because we have 2 firsts and then day 3 picks. And so it's kind of awkward to try and go after that. But I would say, and this is a sneaky one, but TJ Hawkinson is going to probably, I started that like it was for show, probably going to start the season on the pup. I low-key think tight end could be one of those like day 3, let's see if one of these like freaky athletes falls to us, and if there is a tight end available there, I would highly think about making a move in the draft for a tight end that, you know, you see mainly like a pass catching tight end. I feel like we have the blocking tight ends and like the utility guys. You know, Munt is back. I lost his name. Josh Oliver is going to be back. Oliver. So, like, we have these guys that are, like, solid, but I think it would be really exciting if we could add a guy like a oh, what's his name? The guy out of Florida State. His last name is Bell, and I can't remember his first name. But if we could add a guy like Bell, who is really more like a big wide receiver than he is a tight end, I think that could add like a new flavor to this offense, and especially once Hawkinson gets back. I've always been in love with running 2 tight end sets, and I feel like the Vikings don't do that enough. And when they do, Josh Oliver's one of the tight ends, and he's more of a blocking guy and not really the pass catching threat that I think a lot of fans think of when they think of like what people think of is like the Patriots with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. And I know Aaron Hernandez is like a piece of crap, but man, were those offenses cool to watch because they were just bigger than these guys and faster than linebackers and bigger than safeties. And it was fun to watch those mismatches. So tight end is like a low key need, I think. Not really a need. It's like a want. It's a solid want for me. That's not what my question for you was for final thoughts, but here, allow me to pose you a question. Away. If New England called you right now and said, we will give you the 3rd overall pick. You know what? Let me change it. If Washington called you right now and said, we would give you the 2nd overall pick for Justin Jefferson, would you do it? Like straight up, no pick swaps, just the number 2 pick in this year's draft, any quarterback you want not named Caleb Williams, and you keep your other 2 first-round picks. You just have to let Justin Jefferson. Would you do it? That's the question that I'm posing to you.
Who's Jaden Daniels going to throw the ball to?
Jordan Addison and whatever tight end we draft in the 5th round.
Brandon Powell? Yeah. I say no.
I like it, but like, could you imagine if we were able to like swindle Jaden Daniels and get like Rome Odunze at 11? Like,
that's true.
Oh man, it's at least a thought exercise.
Well, you could also then, if you really were like, okay, Justin's gone, we have to trade up to get Rome Odunze. You can do that because you haven't used 11 and 23.
Right.
So if you said like we got to trade up, we're going to go 11 and 23, package that for number 6. You know what I mean? Then maybe you do that.
I also think that there was like the reason I like that exercise is because I love the thought of having 3 first-round picks, like 2 of them in the top 11. That would be nuts. Like that could really change some stuff. You get the quarterback, you replace Jefferson. Oh, you get the quarterback, you get Latu, and then you replace Jefferson because you have Jordan Addison now. And so, like, you have a pretty good wide receiver already. Now you're just adding Addison's 2, but it's just because I don't know that I would slam the pick. You know, I don't know that I would slam the trade home. I just think that it's interesting to think about.
It's interesting. I'm sure somebody's called Kwesi about that.
I think, and this
or
is
will call Kwesi about that.
I think it was the Dustin show, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was just ranting to this, like to my daughter one day on the drive home from picking her up from the sitter. But I'm tired. I'm ready for draft season to be over because I'm tired of seeing like Patriots fans saying, you know, who says no to this trade? And it's like the Vikings send 11, 23, and Jefferson and a 2024 third rounder, or 2025 third rounder, and they get the 3rd pick in the draft. And it's like, what? Like, what is that trade? Like, I don't know. I've said this from the beginning. Justin Jefferson is not DJ Moore. Stop putting them on the same level of like, oh, well, the Bears got 2 firsts and DJ Moore for the number 1 pick. And it's like, yeah, that's DJ Moore, not Justin Jeff. Like, that is like the 15th best receiver in the league on his best day, not somebody who's making a GOAT case. I mean, we're watching LeBron play weekly in the NFL. Like, I don't know. I'm ready for this draft, and I'm excited about this draft. I'll shut up now. I'll let you take us home, but this was a good one, I thought.
It was a good one. 10 days from now, we are recording this on a Monday night, April 15th. 10 days from now, the NFL draft will commence in Detroit, Michigan, of all places. And the Vikings will either have their guy or have a couple guys. We will talk to you after the draft. It'll be the following Tuesday, the 20, or maybe it's the Monday. Can't remember. It's the Monday or Tuesday after the draft with Dustin Baker. We're going to break everything down. There's going to be a handful of guys to look into and maybe one shiny new quarterback. This was Load the Box. It was fun. We will see you after the draft. Skol, y'all.